pairs of stats next season, and that's not a pair you can get, but you can get it this season in the stats that will transfer into those stats next season. So everyone's grinding right now for these armor stats that you're not going to be able to get together next season that you can this season, and they're calling it like illegal armor rules. And I think they fumbled the bag because they have everyone grinding for armor now instead of fucking next season, which is like people should be grinding for the new shit, not the old shit.
I miss the old Kanye, straight from the gold Kanye.
No, you like the anti-Semitic Kanye. Just my elbows hurt.
What happened?
I went to the gym.
Oh, nice, dude.
No, dude, I remember we used to go to the gym in high school, and like I felt good. Felt good when I was done. Like you felt good after the gym. You're like, yeah, like that.
I mean, good. Not right. I mean, not if you do it right. You don't.
No, if you did it right, you did feel good. You were sore, but like you always felt good. Man,
yeah, but it took like a week or like a month to get to that point.
Maybe I don't know.
It's always bad for like the first week, and then after that, it's fine.
I'd rather get hit by a car than go back to the gym.
Oh my god.
It's like in my car, feeling like I'm going to throw up. I didn't even work out that hard. Like it was just like the first day, so I'm like, I'll do a light day. Like,
and he did leg day. Ain't bro is okay.
No light day, but I did the arms and legs. So I did a light day, so I just did both. I know I'm not going to go back till at least Monday because it's going to take me 2 days to recover. But I'm like, man, straight woofing, you know. Oof.
We know you're a straight woofer. We've been saying it. Well, I don't know about straight, but you were definitely a woofer. That's for damn sure.
You're the gayest woofer I know.
I ain't a woofer, man.
Well, yeah.
I'm a barker. Bark.
Big facts. Bark from the dog.
No.
What do you call a gay dog?
You what?
What do you call a gay dog?
I don't know what.
Rebuilt 11.
Oh my god.
Bark.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Bark.
Bro, they're adding human sacrifice into Europa 5.
Part 1.
That they ignored this conventional tactic. Some of their warships were as close to the shore as 1 mile. This made them an easy target for the Ottoman shore batteries. British battleships HMS Irresistible and HMS Ocean were lost, and HMS Inflexible was badly damaged. The French lost the battleship Bouvet with 600 of its crew. These losses forced Admiral de Robeck to fall back and regroup. This defeat was devastating for the Allies, and a huge boost to the morale of the Ottomans. On the morning of the 25th of April, the Allies landed in 2 different parts of the peninsula. The Australians and New Zealanders landed at what has become known as the Anzac Cove, further north than they expected due to navigational errors. The goal of this landing was to advance inland and secure higher ground on Sari Bayir and to cut off the Ottoman troops in Kilit Bahir. The Ottomans did not expect a landing there, therefore only 2 companies were defending this beach. While this force was not enough to stop the Anzacs, unfavourable rocky terrain and Ottoman forces on the high ground inflicted significant damage. Anzac forces lost 2,000 men on the day of the landing and were not able to achieve any notable progress. They were ordered to dig in close to the shore. The second group landed at Hellas Cove. 29th Division landed on 5 different beaches named S, V, W, X and Y. At Y Beach, the First Battle of Krithia took place, and the Allies made significant progress, but were not able to exploit the advantages of their position due to a lack of orders. The Ottoman 25th Regiment prevented them from advancing any further. At W Beach, the Lancashires lost 60% of their forces due to the Ottomans resisting their landing. The common theme of the landings on the 25th of April was that the Allies failed to exploit their advantages and continue advancing due to lack of orders. Instead, they decided to dig in on the shores, which proved to be counterproductive. On the 27th of April, the Ottoman 19th Division and part of the 5th Division counterattacked the Allies at Anzac Cove, but were repulsed with the support of naval gunfire. On the following day, the Allies tried to take the village of Krithia, but the Ottomans were able to stop the 29th Division halfway from Hellas to Krithia after inflicting 3,000 casualties. The arrival of the Ottoman reinforcements to Gallipoli proved that the Entente failed to act swiftly, and the confrontation was going to turn into a war of attrition. On the 30th of April, Mustafa Kemal attacked at Hellas and Anzac Cove and managed to break through the French sector, but had to stop under massive amounts of machine gun fire. The Anzacs counterattacked on the next day, but were repulsed by the Ottomans after a little progress. The Ottomans were dependent on artillery fire from high ground on the peninsula to repulse the Allied attacks. It was of utmost importance for the Allies to take control of these high grounds for the success of the Gallipoli campaign. On the 6th of May, 20,000 Allied men were sent to capture Krithia and the strategic high ground at Ashibaba. The Allies advanced after heavy artillery preparation, and for 2 days a fierce battle ensued, but they failed to capture either of the targets. On the 19th of May, 42,000 Ottoman troops aimed to take the 17,000 Anzacs by surprise and drive them into the sea. But the surprise failed, since on the previous day, the Ottoman preparations were seen by a British aircraft. The fighting went on until early June, when after 13,000 casualties, the Ottomans decreased the intensity of the attack and the lines consolidated. The final major engagement started on the 4th of June, when the Allies attacked Krithia and Ashibaba again with the 29th Division, Royal Naval Division, 42nd Division and 2 French divisions. This attack was stopped as well and led to another period of trench warfare. Hamilton's request for an additional 95,000 troops to secure success at Gallipoli was rejected, since another offensive on the Western Front was planned. Bulgaria's entry into the war on the side of the Central Powers made the situation for the Allies even more precarious. The decision to evacuate troops was made. First, in September, 3 divisions were moved from Gallipoli to Salonika. Despite gloomy predictions, the Allies were able to safely evacuate the majority of their troops by the end of the year. Both sides lost 56,000 people in this short but bloody campaign. The Entente failed due to a lack of coordination, difficult terrain, insufficient planning, the spread of diseases, overconfidence, and spirited resistance by the Ottomans. As a result of this campaign, the confidence of the Ottomans greatly increased, and they managed a victory in Kut al-Amara in 1916 against the British. The attempt by the Entente to support Russia and lighten their military burden failed, which can be considered as one of the reasons behind the eventual revolution and the defeat of Russia. Britain and France continued prioritizing the Western Front, despite bloody and indecisive trench warfare. Churchill resigned from the government and volunteered for active service as a lieutenant colonel on the Western Front. The disaster in Gallipoli was also one of the factors behind the fall of the Asquith cabinet. The war continued for 3 more years. We are planning to continue our series on modern warfare, so make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button. We would like to express our gratitude to our Patreon supporters and channel members who make the creation of our videos possible.
Today we will be looking at 2 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The first one is particularly unique, as the trapped explorer kept abusing his rescuers, to a point that his sheer anger started shutting his body down. As for the second one, it's equally obnoxious. As always, viewer discretion is advised. It was late Saturday evening, October 1st, 1983, when 6 experienced cave explorers made their way into the depths of Drebelbis Cave, located near the quiet town of Kutztown in Berks County, Pennsylvania. These weren't amateur explorers. They were seasoned spelunkers who knew the underground world intimately. The cave system they entered that evening was familiar territory, a place they had likely explored before without incident. For hours, the group navigated the underground passages and they made their way deeper into the earth. Everything proceeded normally until the early morning hours when the group decided it was time to head back to the surface. They began their exit around 2 a.m. with 36-year-old Robert E. Scott bringing up the rear of the group. Scott found himself approximately 75 feet, 23 meters, from the cave entrance, working his way through what appeared to be a manageable vertical crevice. He was third in line, 2 had already made their way successfully. This particular passage was a narrow slot in the rock, stretching about 80 feet, 24 meters high, and generally 12 inches wide. But like many cave formations, this crevice had a cruel trick waiting in its middle section. It narrowed dramatically to just 7 or 8 inches before opening up again below. As Scott maneuvered through this tight section, disaster struck in an instant. His hand slipped on the wet rock surface. In cave environments, surfaces are often coated with a thin layer of mud and moisture that makes them treacherously slippery. Without warning, his body dropped down into the narrowest part of the crevice. In that split second, Robert Scott's world changed forever. He found himself wedged tightly in the middle portion of the crevice, trapped on his left side. The rock walls pressed against his body from both sides, and every surface around him was rounded and slick with mud. There was nothing to grab onto, no way to gain purchase or leverage. The very geological features that had formed this cave over thousands of years had created the perfect trap. Scott's companions immediately realized something was wrong when they lost contact with him. They quickly discovered his predicament. These were experienced explorers themselves, people who understood the underground environment and had likely dealt with tight spots before. But this situation was different. No matter what they tried, they couldn't get scot-free. As the hours passed, it became clear that this was beyond what the group could handle alone. They had tried everything from their experience, but the cave's grip was far more stronger than what they had imagined. At 9:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, after 8 grueling hours of failed attempts, they made the difficult decision to leave Scott behind and go for outside help. Imagine the agonizing choice they faced, leaving their friend trapped in that narrow crevice while they sought assistance from the surface. The ones above Scott made their way through another exit, joining the 2 who made their way outside before. Word spread quickly through the local emergency response network. Volunteers from 4 different fire departments descended on the cave site, bringing with them equipment and determination. These were brave men and women who regularly risked their lives to save others, but cave rescue presented unique challenges that most of them had never faced before. The complexity of the situation soon became apparent. This wasn't a simple matter of pulling someone out of a hole. The victim was wedged deep underground in a space so narrow that rescuers could barely access him, let alone work effectively around him. Recognizing that specialized expertise was needed, authorities contacted the National Cave Rescue Commission. By late Sunday afternoon, 14 highly trained cave rescue specialists were flown in from Pittsburgh. These were the elite of cave rescue, people who had spent years training for exactly this type of emergency. They brought with them specialized equipment and techniques developed specifically for underground rescue operations. When the NCRC team first established contact with Scott, he was described as being in good spirits. After being trapped for over 12 hours, he was still alert and communicating normally with his rescuers. There was reason for cautious optimism, but as Sunday wore on, something began to change in Scott's demeanor. The psychological pressure of being trapped in such a confined space for an extended period began to take its toll. Scott's mood deteriorated rapidly, and he became increasingly irrational and abusive toward the very people trying to save his life. This wasn't simply fear or frustration. His behavior suggested something more serious was happening. The rescue team learned that Scott was epileptic, a medical condition that added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Twice during the rescue attempt, he was given medication to prevent seizures. However, this treatment did nothing to improve his mental state or cooperative behavior. The technical aspects of the rescue were as challenging as they were innovative. Rescuers strung a high line through the passage above Scott and placed slings around his body, attempting to lift him vertically out of the trap. Every time they made even the slightest progress, disaster would strike. Scott would begin thrashing wildly, his violent movements defeating any progress they had made and potentially making his situation worse. Understanding that this would be a long-term operation, the rescue team established a sophisticated support system. They set up monitoring equipment outside the cave and attached sensors to Scott so they could continuously track his vital signs. Keeping him warm became a critical priority. Cave temperatures remain constant year-round, typically in the 50s. Fahrenheit, 10 to 15 Celsius, which can lead to hypothermia during extended exposure. The methods they used to maintain Scott's body temperature were both ingenious and desperate. Heat packs were positioned around him. High-intensity lights were directed at his location, not just for illumination, but for their heat output. Most remarkably, they ran extension cords deep into the cave and used hair dryers, blowing warm air up through Scott's pant legs and sleeves to circulate heat around his body. Despite being trapped in an impossible situation, Scott was able to eat and drink. Throughout the ordeal, rescuers managed to get coffee, broth, hot dogs, and donuts to him. The fact that he could consume food and liquids was seen as a positive sign. It meant his body was still functioning normally, and he had the strength to continue fighting. But Scott's increasingly erratic behavior was becoming the biggest obstacle to his own rescue. As the hours passed, he screamed abuse at the very people risking their lives to save him. The rescue team found themselves in an impossible situation. Their patient was actively working against his own salvation. The medical team on site recognized that sedation might be the key to a successful rescue. If they could calm Scott down, stop his thrashing movements, they might be able to extract him safely. However, the doctors directing the paramedics refused to authorize the use of tranquilizers or sedatives. This decision would become one of the most controversial aspects of the entire rescue operation. Desperate to find a medical authority who would approve sedation, the rescue team attempted something unprecedented. They tried to patch into a local phone line to make a long-distance call to a doctor in California who was also an experienced spelunker. They hoped this physician would understand the unique circumstances and provide the medical authorization they needed. Meanwhile, the technical rescue efforts continued around the clock. Rescuers positioned inflatable airbags underneath Scott, hoping that when inflated, they would provide enough lift to raise him out of the narrow section. They covered his body with grease to reduce friction against the rock walls. They lined the walls themselves with plastic sheeting to create a smoother surface. Nothing worked. The crevice that held Scott prisoner seemed designed by nature to prevent exactly what the rescuers were trying to accomplish. Every technique that might work in other confined space rescues was defeated by the unique geometry of this underground trap. As Monday morning approached, Scott had been trapped for over 24 hours. Around 7 a.m. on Monday morning, as Scott delivered yet another tantrum, screaming at his rescuers, something catastrophic happened. His vital signs suddenly ceased. The monitoring equipment that had been tracking his heart rate and other life signs went flat. Scott lost consciousness, his body finally succumbing to the incredible stress he had endured for more than a day. The rescue team immediately began emergency medical procedures. Oxygen was administered directly to Scott. Heated intravenous fluids were pushed into his system in an attempt to restore his vital signs and bring him back to consciousness. But nothing worked. After 29 hours underground, Robert Scott's body had reached the limits of what it could endure. With their patient unconscious and no longer able to thrash and fight against rescue efforts, the team made the difficult decision to use what they called painful extraction methods. They no longer had to worry about causing Scott discomfort or injury. Saving his life was the only priority that mattered. Using the high line strung above the victim and the slings positioned around his body, they began dragging Scott upward through the narrow crevice. It was a brutal process, one that would have caused significant pain and injury if he had been conscious, but it was now their only option. At 12:25 p.m. on Monday, October 3rd, Robert Scott was finally freed from the crevice that had held him prisoner for over 30 hours. The rescue team worked frantically, hoping against hope that he had simply lapsed into deep hypothermia, a condition from which people can sometimes be revived even after extended periods without vital signs. But their hopes were unfounded. Shortly after his extraction, Robert E. Scott was pronounced dead. The 36-year-old man, who had entered the cave as part of a routine Saturday evening adventure, had become the victim of one of Pennsylvania's most tragic cave rescue attempts. The coroner's report revealed the medical reality of what had killed Scott. The official cause of death was listed as congestive heart failure due to irreversible shock. More specifically, he had suffered a heart attack brought on by the incredible physical stress and pressure on his chest after 29 hours underground. The combination of cold, fear, and physical compression had pushed his cardiovascular system beyond its limits. Importantly, the coroner determined that Scott's epilepsy was not a factor in his death. This next story will definitely send chills down your spine. The Alabama sun beat down mercilessly on June 29th, 2005, as students and instructors gathered at the entrance to Toluca Cave for the National Cave Rescue Commission's summer seminar. The group assembled at the rocky terrain of North Alabama, surrounded by sinkholes and limestone